But at the same time, the bravery and the determination of the people to stand up against what's going on. These kind of images of people who cannot really secure their daily life requirements, we never see it in these glossy magazines produced by the regime or broadcasted by the public relation masters in the West here. These kind of brave activists and human rights campaigners you will never see here. This kind of an individual who can stand up with a single piece of paper and trying to alert the conscience of the international community about what's going on, you will never hear about. But leave alone the stories of the Amnesty International or the reporting of Human Rights Watch or the representation of my fellow speakers here about the kind of oppression, but I will quote an official 10 years report from 1999 to March 2010 of the American administration about the situation of human rights in Bahrain. I'm not going to quote Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch because they are discredited by the Bahraini regime and again accused, but I will quote an official American report which summarized for the last 10 years consistently that Bahrain is not really going towards reforms because the inability to change the government, the impunity which is given to perpetrators of torture and violence, the political party are prohibited and only societies and recapped and castrated political groups are sanctioned, restrictions on civil liberties, freedom of speech, press, assembly and association, lengthy pre-trial detention, lack of judicial independence, corruption in judicial system, discrimination based on gender, religion, sect and ethnicity, infringements of citizen privacy rights, restrictions on freedom of religion and of movement, violence against women, trafficking and restrictions on labor rights. This is an indictment of one of the closest allies of the regime. It is not an idea of a crazy, off-mind Shia activist who's trying really to support his own sectarian ideas about what's going on. And it's not my ideas or any other civil society. It is an official report published consistently for the last 10 years, listing the same menu of grave concerns of the international community. Well, I'm not going to really repeat the figures, but why that happened, and I'm not going to read every single things here which I've written. It can be published later and you can read it in your leisure time. But I will skip to the roots of this conflict. As I said, the roots of this conflict is wiping out the identity of the indigenous community and controlling the resources of Bahrain. Bahrain itself is a very small island with very limited resources, but since 1975 is changed to be one of the most powerful financial institutions in the Middle East. And that is the reason for the escalation of violence. The reason is who is controlling that wealth and who is running it. The bigger the amount of money is deposited in Bahrain, the most oppressive and vicious circle of oppression. In 1975, it was the starting point to pave the way for moving the banking system from Beirut after the civil war to Bahrain. That's why the Prime Minister at the time was convinced by the financial lobby to curb the civil liberty and to cancel whatever is available for that social contract after the independence of Bahrain. And I will try here to bring some angle to what she's saying. An angle that the conflict is around the identity. That's something you can see in the education, in the curriculum, in the media, in day-to-day encounters of trying to impose the minority identity on the identity of the majority. You will see it, and when she mentioned here that in her school when she was 11 years old, she feels that the Bahrain or the Shia are not true Muslims. This is not a new idea. It goes back 300 years when the family of Al Khalifa crossed the boundaries from the immediate Qatar or Zubair to come to occupy Bahrain. And since then, in 1780s, up to today, this mentality of being the conqueror of non-believers is still there, so I'm not really surprised. But I will try really to mention one of the elements of this control is who is in control of the money in Bahrain, who is in control of the resources in Bahrain. And excuse me if I try to be a bit more in time, because I cannot really skip this.
No, that's very, very useful.
And it has never been discussed before. And the current even representation of the conflict is always tried to be reflected as a communal, a rebellious Shia who is not accepting the rule of law against the legitimacy of the state. I want to add a different layer to this and to explain to you what is the most powerful factor, apart from the identity, is controlling of the resources. This is the Central Bank of Bahrain, which is developed for the last 4 years by the ruling family to regulate the financial market environment and to give the Bahrain ruling family the ultimate control of the huge resources, financial resources accumulated since 2001 after the 9/11 and the migration of most of the Islamic banks to Bahrain, which is controlled by few people. So the Central Bank of Bahrain, and I was party to devise the regulation and the development of this as being as humble as being the advisor for strategic planning for the cabinet affairs and the royal court at the time, which is a very powerful position. So here I'm reflecting on my personal encounters. This is the individuals who is controlling the Central Bank of Bahrain. I'm not trying really here to be sectarian by saying who is Shia and who is Sunnah. But that's the country. And these are Jassim Fakhru, Hamid Salman Al-Sayrafi, Rashid Al-Ma'raj, Yusuf Abdullah Hamoud, Zakaria Hijris, Muhammad Yasin Yatim, and Sheikh Muhammad bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, the representative of the ruling family. These are the current board of directors of the Central Bank of Bahrain. But I will go back few years ago, when the current King Hamad II came into his reign in 1999, there is only 3 people who was in the board of that, which is Sheikh Khalifa, the current Prime Minister for 40 years, Abdullah Hassan Saif, the Minister of Finance at the time, and Ahmed bin Muhammad Al Khalifa representing the ruling family. So only 3 people. But at that time, the money wasn't really that big in Bahrain. By 2000, 2 more people came in. Khalid bin Qasim Kanu to represent the commercial elite, and Khalid Hussein al-Masqati as one of the elites who's really connected his fate to the ruling family. By 2003, the king was adamant to start to deregulate the current defunct Muassasat Naqd al-Bahrain, which is not really powerful enough, and brought some advisors from England and the IMF to structure and restructure the financial center, so the power of controlling that money to move from the ministry and Muassasat Naqd al-Bahrain, because it was dwarf enough for the amount of money coming in, and slightly change the board. And this is the board who started really to do that, which the name are not really different from what I said, but I will leave this later on for any interested person to look at it closely. By 2006, Bahrain banks' assets reach $187 billion. And I'm saying this again, $187 billion. Bearing in mind the gross domestic product, the entire Bahraini economy is $11 billion at the time. So the assets in the bank is almost more than 12 times the overall GDP of that small island. It's a huge